Good morning. My name is Jennifer Hornsby, and I work in University Registrar Services. And I am here to share with you about Get the Dish on student profile data. Um, I have worked in the registrar's office for 30 years. I was part of the PeopleSoft implementation project in 2007, and shortly after that, we decided that we needed to make data easier to get to for student profile data. So in 2009, we created the student profile tables in PeopleSoft, and we use these for a lot of our reports. Almost all of our reports in enrollment and records use this data. And so I'm going to just share with you everything I can squeeze into 40 minutes about student profile. Um, so the conference organizers decided that this presentation is intended for data citizens and data apprentices, so those who use pre-built reports or have reports sent to them. Um, I'll try to keep it at that high level, but I'll also get into some details that would be more for data wizards and data. Um, I forget already what the other badge is, but really I'll try to be flexible to include information that all of you might be interested in, but I'll keep it as basic as I can. Um, and really, in 40 minutes, I don't know how many details I could get into anyway. Here is our agenda. So these are the things that I can talk about, and I can skip over any of this that we're not interested in and spend more time on anything you are interested in. So first, I'm going to tell you the basics about the student profile tables and what you need to know about them. Then I will show you some of the information about the enrollment status that is in those tables. I'll show you some of the term statistics, which are things like credit hours and GPA. I'll explain the logic between new, returning, and continuing, and where we get the first year student indicators from. I'll go over the students' major data, which is their major, college, and campus. Um, I can talk about the primary record flags and how those are calculated and how you would use those on reports. And last is just some information about the snapshots that are available and how we use those. So first, these are some documentation that is available to you in Google Drive if you're interested, and Tabia will share those in the chat for you. Um, Let me know if you have any trouble finding them. But the first link is to a Google Doc that explains in English what is student profile and what you need to know about it. So that's basically this presentation. So what am I here for? But you can use it later for reference if you're interested. In addition, the second link is an Excel Google sheet that lists all the fields in all of the tables that you can use for reference to find out more information about what some of the values on a report mean. It defines the values you might find on a report, or if you build reports, what you might, it would help you find what field you might want to use for your report. So the student profile tables are tables that we built in PeopleSoft with the intention of providing simplified data for consistent reporting so that on any report that we use these tables for, we'll get the same information. That also means any report you might build would have the same information if you use these tables. Um, in PeopleSoft, the data that is in these tables is in dozens and dozens and dozens of tables. So to create a report that has all of this in it, you would have to probably use 25 to 30 individual tables to get this information, and that just wasn't acceptable. So we realized that we needed to make it easier to get to. Um, so these tables have the most commonly used student records data in them, which is the major, the enrollment status, the residency status, the new, returning, continuing, and first year student or new transfer, the hours and GPA, their academic level, academic standing, which is probation or disqualification, and graduation. is all in these tables. We also have some easy flags for athletes and honor students, and an enrollment hold yes or no flag. I wanted to let you know there's a pre-built report that you can run to get basically a data dump of all the records in the table, that you can use for flexible reporting for whatever you might need to do with it. When you use this pre-built report, and again, there's a link that Tabia is putting in the chat. Um, this report I'm showing right now is the student profile tables by term. And so you'll see on the screenshot that the term is required when you run this report, and it includes current and future terms. The other values, except the primary record flag, are optional. Um, I'll get into the primary records later, but you probably know that at ASU students can have multiple majors. This table is very flexible in the sense that you can either get only their primary major, so you get one record per student and what their college and major is, or you can get all of their majors, all of their plan codes, all of their minors and certificates, depending on your need. I would recommend probably either only using a primary record flag or the program and plan code. Probably not both together, otherwise you might get unexpected results. You might exclude some students in a major because it's not their primary, or well, maybe that's what you want to do. But if not, then just be careful with that. Um, the reason the term is required on this report is there's data on this report that is only meaningful when related to the term that you ran the report for. So in this screenshot, I ran it for fall of 2021, and all the other values on the report are tied to that semester. So their enrollment status on this report means their enrollment status for fall. This is the other report. It's called the Student Profile Major Current Report, and there is nothing term related on this report. Um, Everything on this report is just about the student's major. It's all the major related data, and it's their current status as of today. This only includes students that are currently active, so that means they've been admitted, they haven't graduated, they're not on a leave of absence. That's basically what that means. And you can see this morning we had 311,000 students in this report, so that's a lot. Otherwise, you see this report also has the primary record flags and the program and plan codes that you can filter. Am I going too fast, or do we have any questions in the chat I should slow down for? Okay, thanks. Okay, so here are the names of the tables. There's three tables I'm talking about today. One is student profile major by term, and the next one is student profile by term, and the third one is student profile major current. The first two tables that have the word term in the name are the two tables that we usually join together anytime we provide enrollment information that includes the student's major. And so the first report I just showed you is those first two tables joined together. And the second report I showed you is the third table. And again, those were just data dumps. Those pre-built reports is everything in those tables. So the first two tables that are by term are term-based data. Students have to be term activated in the term to exist in those tables, and I'll get into what that means in a second. The first table can have multiples because students can have multiple majors, and the major is in that table. So we have all the multiples in there along with flags that let you narrow it down to the primary if you want one record per student, or not if you want the multiples. It has the student's career, program plan, subplan, and then everything related to that about the student. Because a student's major is not necessarily term-based, we have applied logic to that data to pull the record that's effective as of the term start, because of our business processes that rely on that same logic. When students register for classes, they go through what we call the enrollment engine that determines how many credit hours they can register for in that term and some other things like prerequisites and reserve seats. And all of those things in the enrollment engine only recognize the student's major as of the term start date. So if a student was registering today for a fall class, and I know the deadline is past, but let's pretend it's not, um, and they're registering for a fall class, that enrollment engine will follow the rules for the program and plan that's effective for that student as of the term start, not as of today. So since the primary purpose of of these tables was for enrollment reporting, we used the same logic for all of the major related data in the table. Um, the student profile by term is also term-based data, but it's data that would not be duplicated even if the student has multiple majors. So whatever is true about the student for that term, regardless of their major, is in this table. Those would be things like, are they an athlete? Do they have any holds that block enrollment? That's just a couple of examples. So anything that can be collapsed across all the multiples a student might have is in that table. The third one is the student major current. And that is all the same data that's in the first table about the student's major, but it's as of the current date instead of as of the term date, because sometimes that's what you need. And so we basically replicated everything in that table except pulled it as of today's date. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the student profile major by term and the student profile by term. I said that the students have to be term activated to exist in the table, and that's because a lot of the data comes from term history data, which only exists when they're term activated. But what does term activation mean? In PeopleSoft, term activation has to be there before the student can register for a class. And all the data that has to do with their credit hours, their academic level, like are they a freshman or a sophomore, is tied to that term. Since all that data is the good stuff we wanted in the table, it only exists when the student has already been term activated. That means that future admits are not in this table. Um, all the data that's in the table is tied to a term, so either the record already has a term in it or we pull the effective date as of the term start. That means we only put information in this table where there's a business rule that ties to a term, and that as a student's record changes over time, you could tie it to a term and see those changes by term. Also, this only includes the accredited careers, the careers that students receive credit at ASU for, so that's undergrad, grad, and law. Um, Non-credit is excluded, and non-credit is Global Launch. If you're familiar with those programs, they offer English speaking and other type of non-credit programs, and that's not in this table. It goes back to spring of 2005. Here's a view of all of the fields for a particular student from fall of 2007. Um, you can see some of the descriptions are in here, but most of these fields are codes. Um, and this is the first table. This is the student profile major by term. You can see it has information about their major, their enrollment status, their term statistics, and their GPA. So here are the requirements for term activation. This is what has to exist for the student to be term activated and exist in the term tables. They have to be admitted for that term, or they have to be continuing from an earlier term, and they have to still be active as of the term start. The students who are not active are primarily students that graduated, but there are other students that are discontinued due to non-enrollment or maybe on a leave of absence or things like that that would cause them to not be active anymore. And I just want to point out that we discontinue students before we term activate. So the students who were admitted and didn't enroll or haven't been enrolled in so long that they don't meet the continuous enrollment requirements for their program are discontinued and they're no longer active, and that prevents them from being term activated, which prevents them from being able to enroll without being admitted again. So understanding all of that would help knowing when you're using these tables, what's included and what's not, and whether these tables are good for your purpose. These are the enrollment related fields in the table. And again, this is just a single student. This student is enrolled. The enroll stat is E, that means enrolled. The other values are N for never enrolled, D for dropped, and they don't have any W grades. And W means they withdrew and they have at least one W grade and no other enrollment. It has their academic load. F is full-time, and then there's some other statistics about how many classes and how many credit hours they're taking. So all that information is collapsed into the ASU enroll stat, and there's 4 values. I just mentioned real quickly what they are, and the actual values are in that Google sheet that was shared at the beginning. This is some sample data for about 15 students from fall of 2020, just showing you what the different records might look like in this report or in this table. So students that are enrolled or were enrolled have a first registered date. If they dropped or withdrew and we've posted a withdrawal date, then there's a withdrawal date and a reason. And then you can see the different records for their academic load and their units. This is the same fields, but for one individual student over many terms. So you can see for this student, they were not enrolled their first semester, which was summer of 2015. They were enrolled their next semester, which was fall of 2015, and they were enrolled after that for spring of 2016. So this is just illustrating what the data looks like, and just an example of what it might look like for an individual student. These are the term statistics that are usually requested on reports. So their GPA, and I apologize, my screenshot is bad because the GPA is usually not just a 3, it would be a 3.00. But other than that, these are the students' units for the term. The fields that start with UNT are the fields for that student in the term. That means the student was registered for 17 credit hours in fall of 20. The fields that start with TOTE are the aggregated total for that term. So up through fall of 2020, the student had earned 113 credit hours. 110 of them were transfer hours. And this is just a quick look at the term statistics data for a few students for the same term. So these are different students all in the same term. This table also has the academic level. So freshman, sophomore, junior, senior are the most common. We usually use the academic level at the beginning of the term on reports, especially reports that are for enrollment reporting, because they won't have earned credits until the end of the term, or at least until the end of session A. As their credit hours are posted, as their grades are posted, then you would see the academic level for the end of term increment. Also, the projected academic level includes credit hours they have in progress for prior terms. So if you were looking at this table at a future term, the academic level projected would probably be different than the academic level end of term or beginning of term. And these are just samples for one student over many terms, and you can see how their academic level increased as their credit hours increased until they graduated and became a post-bac second bachelor's student. Now I'm going to show you the new returning continuing and the first year student versus new transfer. So a lot of attention is given to new students, particularly first year students and new transfer students. And this table includes the logic. that is as close as we can get to what institutional analysis will use on the 21st day of the term to identify the first year student cohort. Um, it's not perfect because when we're in the middle of a term and before the 21st day, the data is very messy and it's changing every day. So it's as close as we can get. But in general, we're following the same guidelines that they use. The reason is because before the 21st day, we want to focus on these students and be able to give them support. So we want to know who they're going to be, if that makes sense, even if we don't have the official um, first year student cohort yet. So first year students are new students in this table, and they're not non-degree or visiting scholars who would be new non-degree students. But if they're new and they're not non-degree and they graduated from high school this year in 2021, or they graduated before this year, but they have less than 12 transfer credits, then they're a first year student. If they have 12 or more transfer credits and it was taken after their high school graduation, then they're a new transfer. And that's the basic definition that we've been using at ASU for as long as I've been here. Um, Now I'll back up and explain what new, returning, and continuing means. You have to be new before you can be a first year student, but new basically means you've not been here before. So it could be a new graduate student or a new transfer student or a new non-degree. Returning means the student's been here before, but they weren't here last term. So in the fall of 2021, our last term would have been last spring of 2021. Summer is optional at ASU, so whatever they were in the summer is not relevant when we calculate new, returning, and continuing. And continuing means they were here last spring. Now, what does being here mean? When we look for prior enrollment to calculate new, returning, and continuing, we're only looking to see if they are enrolled in a prior term or withdrawn with at least one W grade. Um, we only look at fall and spring, and we only look at enrollment that was in state-funded classes. An example of a non-state funded class would be the online orientation like ASU 10 or 11. There are a few other programs that are not state funded. Universal learning classes are not state funded, just as an example, neither is ASU Prep. Um, so the prior enrollment has to have been state funded. Most of our classes are state funded though. Also, the student has to have been at the same education level, and the education levels are bachelor's, master's, doctoral, or non-degree. So if they were non-degree, maybe they enrolled in prep while they were in high school, and now they're degree seeking, then they would be new now, even though they had attended ASU in the past. We also remove visiting scholars and exchange students from the logic for new, returning, and continuing, only because in some instances, visiting scholars have returned as a student who intends to get a degree from ASU, and so we've built that into the logic as well. So here's a little diagram that I use all the time to answer questions for people when they want to know why someone is new or returning or continuing or why they're not new. So this is just the flow chart that is followed by a very complicated program to identify new, returning, and continuing. Okay, so once we identify all of that, we use all of these different fields. All the information basically is going into the calculation for both new, returning, continuing, and also first year student versus new transfer. Um, I mentioned the degree level is used. So bachelor's, master's, non-degree, and that is in the table. So it's readily available and easy to get to find those classifications. So here is a sample of um, about 20 different students in the fall of 2020 and their different new, returning, continuing, and new undergraduate statuses. And you can see what the different values look like in the report. I should also explain that only undergrads have a new undergrad status. So a grad student who's new doesn't get a new undergrad status. Near the bottom, you can see some master's students and some law students. And this is an example of a single student over several years showing that they would have been a new freshman in the summer of 2013 if they had enrolled. Um, well, whether they enrolled or not, they didn't enroll, and it wouldn't have mattered because it was summer. In the fall of 2013, they were new freshmen and they did enroll. So in the spring of 2014, they were continuing. And you can see how their record changed over time. They returned in the spring of 2015 after skipping. Um, and then they became a graduate student in 2019. So you can see they were new again, new as a grad student. And this is all of that related data about 25 different students in a single term. Um, this is just an illustration about how effective dates are used on the program plan stack, and then that effective date is important for the student profile tables. So this is a single student's record showing their program and plan changes over time. And the third column here, named EFFDT, is the effective date. And those are important for the student profile tables by term. So you can see the student applied, was admitted, was matriculated, then had no changes until they applied for graduation in 2018, and then they graduated. So that's our goal. If you look at the action date, you can see that none of these records were backdated. The effective dates match the action date. The effective dates can be backdated or future dated when advisors change a major or make a change to the student's record. The action date can't be changed. That is the actual day the transaction was made. So on this example, nothing was backdated. On this example, this is a different student where something was backdated. In 2018, a major change was done. The PRGC is a major change. You can see this student changed from having only a criminal justice major to adding a minor. I don't know what MIS is for, but whatever that minor plan code is for. And when that was done, it was backdated prior to that term start. So on January 31st, they backdated it to January 5th. That's what we mean by backdating. And that's how advisors intentionally backdate things when they need a student, maybe to be eligible for an enrollment requirement or a prereq for some of the classes they needed for that minor. I'm going to skip over this example. This is examples of some primary record flags for a few students in fall of 2020. So the primary record flags let you get one record per student if that's what you need, or one record per career if that's what you need. After we identify the primary plan code, the primary program code, and the primary career code, when all of those are primary, then we set the whole record to be the primary record for the student. So you see the first student, the first row for that student is the primary record, and all of the career, the program, and the plan all have a Y as well. You can see the non-primary majors are usually a minor or a certificate. These examples, most of these students have concurrent degrees, and so you can see they have programs in usually 2 different colleges, but not always. I'm going super fast, I know. Let's see, this table also has the residency status, and this is residency for tuition purposes, so all the values are either resident or non-resident. The table also has information about graduation. So at ASU, students have to apply to graduate before we know when they're going to graduate. And when they do, this table will have the term code for the term they plan to graduate. If we have posted the degree, then you'll see the completion term. Those are the only two fields that are not effective as of the term start. They're effective as of the current date. Um, okay, the second table out of the three we're talking about today is the student profile by term, and we almost always join this to the first table that we were just looking at. And this does not have anything about the student's major, it's just the student in the term. It includes the state-funded flag and the number of state-funded units they're in, which we use for enrollment tracking and reporting for the 21st day. It has the Barrett Honors flag, the athlete flag, and enrollment holds flag, so it'll tell you yes or no if the student has any holds that block enrollment. It also has academic standing, so that's probation and disqualification. Here's an example of one student's record showing all of those fields. This student does have a hold that blocks enrollment, so the service indicator negative is a Y. But I can tell that this student is enrolled, so the hold must have been applied after they had already enrolled because they're in 12 state-funded units and they're full-time. The last table I want to talk about is the student profile major current. And this is the student's current major as of today, so it's not tied to a term at all. It only includes active students, so they have to be admitted and not graduated. But this table does include non-credit, also known as global lunch, unlike the other tables we just looked at. And since it's the record as of today, it's not tied to a particular term and there is no term-based data. So this table does not have enrollment status, it does not have academic level or GPA, anything that has to be tied to a term to mean anything. Other than that, it has all the nice major related data that was in the first table we looked at. Last are some snapshots that we take of these tables and some other tables that we have to use for enrollment tracking. Enrollment tracking allows us to report enrollment today compared to the same point in time in the prior year, or going back however many years you want to go. So the two first tables I showed you are snapshot along with some information from the student's enrollment table and the class table and the person table. And the reason these are all joined together has to do with enrollment reporting, and we tie them together by snapshot date, snapshot week number, and day number. We snapshot the data so we can get an easy point in time comparison. For a lot of this data, it changes dynamically. A student could be a freshman today and a sophomore tomorrow, and none of that is effective dated. So the snapshots help us reproduce a record as of a certain point in time very easily. The snapshots that we take are related to the term start date. So the term start is day 0. The day before the term started is day -1, and the day after the term started is day 1. And that allows us to compare multiple terms against each other using the same point in time without using the calendar date, since the academic calendar changes a lot and changes unexpectedly, just like it did last year when spring break was removed and the term ended early. So here is a look at an example of snapshot dates that we're taking for spring 2022 and comparing to spring of 2021. So next Monday on November 22nd, we'll be comparing enrollment that day with November 23rd of 2020. Those are both 7 weeks prior to the term start, and so it's a comparable point in time. Day 0 is the first day of classes for each term. So you can see those dates and the 21st day, the 45th day, and the end of the term. Also in this screenshot, I'll just point out, since last spring had no spring break and ended earlier because of that, you notice that by the end of the term, the dates are not even not as close together on the calendar as most terms usually are. That was an odd year last year. Well, I blew through that, but I'm glad to know that there's enough time for questions. Is there anything you'd like to ask or anything you want me to go back and talk about slower?
Hey, Jennifer, it's Aaron.
Hi.
First of all, thanks for putting that asterisk in the presentation or in the description that it wasn't the Salesforce student profile. I appreciate that. I hope everyone was not confused. The student profile does not have this much data, obviously, that the PeopleSoft student profile has. Lots of colleges are interested in finding their students who change majors, either out or into their college. What would be a basic process that folks could look at to see who's in their major at a given point in time, and then who's no longer in their major at a given point in time, but may have previously been in that major?
Well, using student profile, let me think about this. Using the pre-built student profile reports that are out here, one way would be to run the student profile by term for the current term and export those results, and then run it again for next spring, and then use Excel to compare the differences. You could also compare it to the results of the current student profile, knowing that you might lose students who have graduated in between the two. That's the only way to use these reports that I'm talking about during this session to do that. We do have some other pre-built reports that track major changes from one term to a next. One of the most popular is the FTFYS cohort with current program and enrollment status. So if they only need to look at a student who was in a FTFYS cohort, that report tracks where they're at today, what college, what major, did they change colleges, did they change majors, and also if they left, if they're no longer enrolled, or if they graduated. So that's a popular report. We do have a few other reports that we haven't converted yet from the My Reports retirement that track students that changed a major from one term to the next. Those aren't available yet, but they will be.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
and if someone can build their own query, they could query student profile just like I did in these screenshots to look at a student's major from one term to a next on their own.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We got a question in the chat if there's time.
How do transfer credits affect the total cumulative credits? Does the total show what the student actually has? Um, I'm not sure I understand what is meant by what the student has left.
I can clarify. Um, so with the table showing the total cumulative credits, and like let's say if we look at a student stars and they have a lot of transfer credits, sometimes it's hard to decipher what the student actually has left because of transfer credits to graduate. What I'm asking is, does the table show that total cumulative credits of what the student actually has left, or does it still get confusing because of the transfer credits?
The total cumulative is pretty boring. It's just the total they already have. It's not going to tell you how many more they need. There are some new tables and data warehouse that are brought in from DARS that are used to calculate how many they need and what they need. But in student profile, we don't have any of that, mostly because student profile only has data that is in PeopleSoft, and the DARS data is not in PeopleSoft, unfortunately. So that data is available in the data warehouse and I think in analytics, but unfortunately it's not in these tables. The only thing that you would notice is if a student came from a 2-year institution with more than 60 credits, that deduction is made before it's added to the total cumulative.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Don't see any other questions in the chat.
I see a direct message to me, so I will answer that offline.
Okay. Well, that's our time for today. Thanks to our presenter, Jennifer, and we appreciate everyone who joined today. I'm going to drop in our Slack and information link into the chat. So feel free to check out and collect badges so that you'll be able to participate in that part of the program. And now that the conference has come to an end, I just want to remind everyone that we still have a survey that's coming out to you, and we'd like for you all to complete that survey. And then, of course, join us for our in-person Sliced event. It's sure to be fun. It's going to be a lot of games. There's some snacks that will be there. So we love to see you there. That's all I have for you. I guess I could show the the Slack and agenda and sliced slides. But thanks again, Jennifer. It's a great presentation. And thanks again to everyone who joined us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Tabia.
Sure.